Deploying to Vercel using Vercel tech or ecosystem, which is open source Next.js, other frameworks, a lot of default things are happening behind the scenes that your deployment is just fast.
For example, knowing where something is happening, it's for many complex systems which enterprises are using, it's a challenge.
If we gonna talk about the enterprise, oh boy, we have something really big this time for enterprises.
Hello and welcome to the Next Gen Web podcast, when we explore web performance, architecture, and innovation. I'm joined here with my colleague Igor, who is software engineer, and Dom Sipovic from Vercel. My name is Hubert, and I'm head of delivery in Blazity. Dom, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you first of all for having me. My name is Dom, and I'm a solutions engineer, solutions architect working for Vercel for more than 3.5 years.
I think we can easily go through the main points of your career.
Okay.
Things that you are proud of or you would like to share with us. Like, how come that you finally became a solution architect in Vercel?
Yeah, because I don't have gray hairs, so I'm not a fully architect yet. However, I do have quite a lot of experience, years under my belt. So I joined Vercel more than 3.5 years ago. I joined as an engineer, but I pivot to professional service team, which probably we're going to touch base later on. I specialize in Next.js expertise, e-commerce, web performance, and a little bit touch on SEO, and for the last few years, Gen AI as well. And I work mainly with enterprise customers.
If my question will be, what's the most unusual or different thing working for Vercel? Is there something like this? Is there any magical powder that is at this work for you?
That's an interesting question. Most difficult. Well, I think Vercel is moving really fast as a company. We've got many products and a lot of is happening. We're shipping fast. Recently, we have Vercel Ship. We're probably going to also talk about it. The hard part is the high level of all the engineers at Vercel. So for me personally, when I joined, I had this imposter syndrome, like Vercel hiring from the industry, a lot of celebrities from the development world, and then they hired Dom, who is coming from Krakow, Poland, and that was like a clash of thing for me in the beginning, but after 3.5 years, I think I'm doing okay.
So taking the whole experience you mentioned, I think there's a question that's very common in like the world of, for instance, X communities or just project maintainers that aim to achieve some open source audience goal. So what is, in your opinion, the biggest difference between enterprise clients and medium-sized businesses?
That's a really good question. So you touch on X and social media. So the most visible presence, in my opinion, is like you've got DevRels, you've got pushing new products, new open source projects, and this is what's super visible from outside about Vercel, because we do those things, and it's great for all developers. We very deeply care about the DX, developer experience. However, my team, so I've got a lot of experience, and actually mainly what I do day to day is I'm working with enterprise customers, like you said. And the difference is very subtle, because if you think about some templates or examples or way of working, way of deploying, CI/CD pipeline, everything, if you put hobby and pro or indie hackers here and enterprise here, those are two different worlds. So I operate mainly on this enterprise part, and this is my most experience for the last 3.5 years. So I can talk about that. Yeah, in terms of examples, if you think about deploying, Vercel is the best platform for indie hackers, and everything is super simple and designed for the best DX. However, the enterprises, they have their own workflows, their own ways of working, like a different release cycle. Indie hacker just push the main, right?
Yeah.
YOLO coding or vibe coding these days, right? And enterprises, they have different CI/CD. Enterprises can. So I worked, for example, before joining Vercel, I had one CI/CD pipeline with 18 steps. You know, indie hackers or smaller projects, you just merged and you have maybe 3 checks, something like that. Maybe you have those unit tests, end-to-end tests, or blocking releases. It's totally different worlds. Yeah.
Basically, it's like a collision of two worlds, like the indie developers that actually prefer to experiment, move fast, and not have actual structures of work or just processes that needs to be done before, for instance, deploying. And on the other side, there's the enterprise world where actually most of the things must be structured. And most of the things are that enormous that, as you mentioned, like the CI/CD with 80 steps, this is something that must be handled in a reliable way.
There are more differences. I can talk about that. For example, enterprises work in sprints, agile. You've got those boards, Jira tickets, this end of sprints, you know, show and tell demos. Indie hackers, they follow like releasing on the moment of finishing feature, you just release it. So by default, Vercel platform follows, in terms of merging strategy, you've got trunk-based development. That's the default workflow when you onboard on Vercel. However, like I would say 90% of enterprises, they follow Git flow. So they've got, you know, multiple environments, you know, QA, pre-prod staging, and the same is reflected in their branching strategy, which is QA branch, etc. End of the sprint, they have this merge party where they're merging everything and then creating a release. It's totally different in enterprise and smaller projects or this indie world, right? Also, you have different approach to security, because indie hackers are, you know, they start to get interested in security when they're under attack or when the usage is higher on the platform. This is the moment where you get paying more attention to best practices or security. This is, to be honest, something that we deal in my team. I can talk about my team, by the way, as well, how this looks at Vercel. I'm going to give another example. Like Vercel is super big on open source, and we have a lot of open source content on the internet. We share it, we contribute it, we sponsor it, and we have like examples of different templates. There is actually a template catalog on Vercel where you can choose different kind of templates, what you want to kickstart your project from, or migration. When you're in the hacker, you can just take this template, deploy it with one button to Vercel, and start building on top of that. Enterprises, they, you know, it's a whole migration process. It's a proof of concept usually. Then there's a talk about MVPs, and sometimes though, even in those templates, they're not enterprise ready. This is, by the way, actually something I want to put out to the internet, that in my personal opinion, this is really bad that we have just one template for something, for a solution, but it should be, you know, something that is enterprise grade and a normal solution to a problem. And we are talking about headless CMS, maybe enterprise e-commerce.
A follow-up question to what you said. We will just move in a second to your team, but I wonder how you see your role typically in the migration process, or when you pick up a new cooperation with a new client. What's your role? What are the steps, if there are typical steps? Because you mentioned that every process is slightly different. There are but definitely there are some common areas in your work when you're onboarding a new client or starting working with the new client. So what will be your flow, your approach to onboarding a new client or starting a new cooperation? Okay,
so first of all, my team only works with enterprise customers.
Yes.
And usually the biggest brands at Vercel, usually that's my team.
Yes.
Working with. And when we onboard new enterprise customers for professional services, because this is what my team is doing, some of the stuff is standard, like discovery phase questions, what needs to be done, what's the level of maturity the development team have. Sometimes customers work with agencies, software houses, or have in-house development. So there's a different cooperation if the agency is our official Vercel partner, which I know that Blazity is.
Yes.
So there are custom different approaches to that. But I would say first you want to do some kind of assessment, then identify the gaps, whether it's in the knowledge gaps in the dev team, whether it's a technology gaps, maybe it's an architecture gaps. And here you mentioned migrations. So I would say that much more than half of our projects that we work with are migrations. And here's the funny part. So my team can engage in the like a halfway through that migration already started, or my team can engage on the very beginning phase, in this discovery phase, when the business, okay, we have a budget, okay, we are planning what to do. If my team going to be engaged on the very beginning of this process, we found out that actually the success is more likely because we can have input on the architecture, on technology stack, on best practices from the day one. Migration starts, with POC, which is proof of concept. Then you've got this MVP when you start dropping some production traffic, and then you've got this production grade rollout, which is already, with 100% of traffic, let's say. The more on the left you're going to start engaging with professional services, the better it is before you're going to start writing code or these technology decisions. And for example, this is tremendously important and impactful for e-commerce migrations. If we identify there are some development gaps, like somebody is using a different agency that is Angular shop and not like Blazity or Next.js experts, you want workshops and trainings. This is something we do in our team. If it's midway migration, we can create an audit of the code audit, web performance audit, usage audit, and all across this engagement, we can provide consultation hours as a architecture review and best practices. So that's roughly the process of onboarding.
I'm asking specifically about the migration because it's one of the, as you said, one of the common cases that many clients, I would say, at least from my experience, both enterprise level and startup, scale-up level, they are looking for something better, something different that they have. So, in your opinion, what's the motivation? What's the sentiment behind this decision for the enterprise-grade clients? This is very interesting for us because some of us had a privilege or chance to work with the enterprise clients. Some of us just wants to do this at some point in a life cycle of the company or our personal growth. So why those companies are coming to Vercel, to you guys, to your team, and what they are looking for?
Funny what you said about that you've got privilege to work with enterprise customers. Well, I only work with enterprise customers, so I would like to, small startups as well at some point. Vercel, that's my personal opinion. Vercel at some point become a synonym of fast web. This is, by the way, our core mission of Vercel company. Our leadership is focused and experienced with web, and we want to make web the fastest. That's our core mission of our company. And all across from top to bottom, we have expertise to deliver exactly that. In the enterprise world, through use cases, through success stories, we've proven that deploying to Vercel, using Vercel tech or ecosystem, which is open source, Next.js, other frameworks, you have bigger chances for because of the great defaults. Like deploying to Vercel, a lot of default things are happening behind the scenes that your deployment is just fast. I'm talking about the ISR and other stuff we can talk about, dig deeper in the tech. However, those companies and businesses heard about it, they know about it, and they choose Next.js, okay, with Vercel, and naturally becoming an enterprise customer, and then at some point have this professional services engagement. So that's the motivation for sure.
So faster processes, faster deployment, general faster experience for the users, or
So that used to be the case for since the beginning, like literally that's a bedrock and the foundation. However, for many years it's not only faster but also secure. So we have Vercel firewall, and all security certificates are on our platform. And there's actually more to security that usually people understand. This is actually a great example of difference between, indie hackers, hobby pro, and enterprise. We now talk about the security, for example. So we've got web performance, security, and AI native. So in my personal opinion, there's no better platform right now to start AI workflows, AI applications, AI native. And there's a reason for that. If we're going to have time to cover those topics, I can say more about that. So this social proof on blog posts, those use cases and those logos of the customers that deploy and use Vercel is super important. When you see those logos and they have great conversions. We have use cases which especially in e-commerce world, when you have those migrations and suddenly those businesses quote numbers like 30% conversion lift, better visibility, Core Web Vitals are much greener. And on the end of the day, that hit bottom line. And for the business people, bottom line is probably the most important, especially in e-commerce.
The security thing, I think that, and also the AI capabilities, I think those two things, at least in my professional experience working with big pharma, for example, or any other highly regulated environment, security is one of the reasons they decide to move towards some solution or drop some other solution. So I do think that the one of the significant decision factors for any enterprise is how risky it is to use some tool.
Good actually comment. So I know a lot of projects was won with Next.js and Vercel was because of choosing Next.js as this driver platform technology framework, and companies look on how active the project is, how fast the security issues are resolved, what is the disclosure process, with those security incidents. I personally believe that Next.js do this really well, and we were moving fast. If there is any security issue, I still need to say it. I know that I'm working for Vercel, but even when before the disclosure of the CVS, if there's any security issue, we obviously fix that in the open source project in the framework itself. However, there was last security thing few months ago. The projects deployed to Vercel were naturally shielded and protected because of our infra, firewall and all the systems that Vercel provide, which I think is really cool and building for those enterprises that, if you think seriously about the security. Also, I want to use this opportunity and say that what I'm seeing recently in the enterprise world is that more and more enterprises, because for many years it was like that they wanted to use Vercel for DX, web performance, great tech and features, right? However, they sometimes put other CDNs in front of Vercel. If you're talking about the security, that sometimes it's not fully working concept. So what I'm seeing for recently is that those enterprises remove the third party other providers, CDN providers, and have only Vercel in front, which is great experience for all the ecosystem for Vercel and especially for security. Because if you've got some proxy in front of or CDN, you lose this fingerprinting, and we're going to talk about it in relation to Vercel Ship, what was shipped and new features, because there's really cool stuff that is related into that.
Yeah, I think if you I already mentioned that, the Vercel Ship, really high level question, what are the most important things from there?
Okay, again, I think we should make this distinguish between the developers, indie hackers, and maybe enterprises. So which one you want me to answer first?
Maybe let's start with developers, as we were talking about enterprises for a while.
Because you're a developer.
Yeah.
Engineer. Right. I've seen on X, the Everything app, what most engineers and web developers and what we're hyped about is bot ID. That's basically a thing to replace this CAPTCHA with invisible CAPTCHA. Like, tell me, who likes to prove to the some UI that I'm not a bot?
Nobody.
I'm not an NPC. Come on, like
literally nobody.
yeah, exactly. So Vercel shipped a solution for that, and now it's invisible. Yeah, see, so this is again this point that you don't want to put CDN in front of Vercel because you don't have this whole flow of fingerprinting, all of this context of the request. So you want to use Vercel as a CDN. Sorry, as a whole complete infra solution without any providers in front. And then you can use this bot ID, which is amazing. So this is what developers like. Another thing is actually two things, which is AI Gateway. We're touching on this AI wave of last 2-3 years of AI apps and AI development. So AI Gateway, which was announced before, but now it's widely available. We also announced Vercel Fluid Compute. However, this time we announced on Vercel Ship CPU active pricing, which is another, again, something that Vercel reducing the prices. So if you think about for last year, all across the board, we reduced the image optimizations, ISR, Vercel Fluid actually reduced the function execution time. Well, this is the last swing. The reason why I bound it into those two with AI Gateway, because it's perfect setup for AI workloads, AI applications, and working with AI models, streaming, etc. Because you don't pay for the CPU time when it's idle, when you're waiting for the AI model to finish. So this is for the developers, those three things. If you're a developer, this is what in my personally is the coolest. And if we gonna talk about the enterprise, oh boy, we have something really big this time for enterprises. And if you're an enterprise, I think this is the most important three things for you to look into. First, we have rolling releases. I don't know, have you used it yet? Rolling release on any project?
Nope.
No? Oh, okay. So I highly recommend to use it because it's so cool. Rolling release, it's like a blue-green deployment. So you've got those staging, production, and you don't want big bang, just flip traffic and YOLO. What you're gonna do? Just look for errors and then maybe roll back. This enterprises wanted this security still,
of course.
Not only security but actually reliability, being professional, minimize the downtime and stuff. So rolling release, picture that simple story. Now, actually, in the past, it was super hard to being a release manager. Those companies had, end of the sprint, you've got this merge party when poor tech lead, was merging all the PRs.
Yes.
And then releasing, it was like huge stressful actually
Yeah.
moment.
And a bucket of PRs that are maybe, I mean, they're not conflicted for sure because there are tests, etc. But the risk is higher, definitely, right?
You had the whole playbook, run book for the whole release process, right? Literally, the title is in the name is release manager, right?
yeah.
So Vercel obviously strive for the best DX, best practices, and we want to give the companies and the projects and the dev teams the same what Fang had with those best solutions, how they work. If you look on the past few years, we actually all those primitives what we give, like instant rollback, feature flags development, like everything this trunk-based development as a default model, and all of that allows you to move faster, more secure, more confident way. So rolling release is, now picture the story. If you're a release manager, so imagine yourself as, in Star Trek, Captain Picard holding a coffee, like, well, let's release it, engines, 5% of traffic. Yeah, and you're looking at those errors, DevOps teams, status report of logs, marketing team, any feedback wrong on socials, and now you're standing with that and just rolling release, 5, 10%, 20%, and you've got a dashboard like this command center, like on the Star Trek. You don't need Mr. Spock. Full ahead, 50% of traffic, and then you see, errors before and after, difference between the staging and production. And then you see on the right Core Web Vitals. So web performance, Bedrock, the foundation and then, Captain Picard on the end say full throttle, 100% of traffic. Thank you. That was my release. No problems.
Yes. Perfect. This concept is, I know that we in different projects that we do in Blazity, we used sometimes for the enterprise, we use this concept of Canary release, which is
the same.
Very close.
Canary, blue, green, AB, but on the project on the
of
level.
course. But as you said, everything is within the Vercel ecosystem.
Yeah.
So of course, you can have multiple tools to do that, but you also create more points of failure because you're using third party, you're using Unleash, you're using all the different, tooling around it, which is
and the stack increases and the complexity is
exactly
like even bigger.
Yeah, about this complexity, what you said, Igor, is that we actually had open source template called blue-green deployments, but again, it's cool for smaller projects. But if you're enterprise, it's not finished because you still need to create, sticky sessions, to stick the load balance users or implement edge config with rolling releases like this percentage. Right now, it's first class citizen on Vercel platform. It just works. You can start using it. And how cool is that? If your title is now release management, get this mag. It's so easy job now.
Of course.
I remember some time ago we were estimating like how to implement the rolling release in some project just in theory, and we actually were just thinking about making our own implementation, as you mentioned, like the edge config, manual fetching, the content dividing, actually the traffic dividing. And so now it just works with a couple of clicks in the dashboard.
Yeah, that's amazing. So this is number one thing I would say for enterprises. The second thing, oh boy, another big one. I don't have a great story about this, but it's about micro frontends. Maybe that's the reason why I don't have the good story about this. It's very opinionated topic, by the way, micro frontends. Like if you're going to check X, the Everything platform app, everyone have different opinion. Everyone got different implementations. I don't want to say too much because I'm only will surface my opinion about it. So because we at Vercel obviously are very opinionated. As of today, we have a first-class citizen support from micro frontends. So for enterprises, picture your e-commerce, and it's so natural when you grow because you're this post-monolith phase, post in growth cycle. You want to scale. You've got this massive traffic. Naturally, you have more developers, maybe few teams. and then your setup, your project, your code base, your build, your pipeline is super complicated. So the best practice actually is to split it. So this is where the micro frontends comes in. For years at Vercel, we were advising multi-zone support. However, you can use with micro frontends because it supports both splitting horizontally and vertically. You can do both. That's the beauty of this approach, what we are rolling out now. And for this e-commerce, what I'm trying to say is that you want to split, for example, for browse journey, which is getting a lot of traffic. You drop advertising. That's logically different from, let's say, buy journey, which is, basket checkout. So you can make it as a separate applications, separate deployments, separate development teams, separate code base, separate pipeline, and you can do it however the user use your e-commerce, buys goods and services, and see only one domain, one e-commerce shop. And that's the beauty of it.
So what you're saying is the maintenance of the micro frontend, let's say, splitted project is way more clear, right? From the DX perspective,
Yeah.
easier to manage all those steps, which are from the end user perspective, one, let's say, funnel, for example. But from the development perspective, you're managing 7 different apps or 6 different apps.
I would say not from the business perspective. I would say from development, from
yes,
engineering, there is a super urge for and push for split, because
Absolutely.
if you've got a monolith, the builds are long. The complexity is long. However, with these days with vibe coding and you want this whole context, to be honest. So still you can use monorepo and then have split. So you still have the AI context of everything. But in my opinion, it was always engineering push. The business would split by logical, like I did browse and buy.
Yeah.
So a business could release checkout without affecting the browse application. Or another split in e-commerce is you've got a store finder or information pages, CMS-driven pages. So you can release those which are not mission critical without affecting those. Stable release.
Funnels, checkout,
Yeah, so
everything else.
that could be business requirement.
That's absolutely great, I think, because I can, from the top of my head, I can give also another angle to this, which is monitoring of each separate service or each separate part of the funnel or any other e-commerce situation. So, for example, knowing where something is happening, it's for many complex systems which enterprises are using, it's a challenge sometimes. Like where is the delay? Where is the cold start happening? Where those things are actually taking place? And I was involved in many processes or projects that we were trying to drill down, and we failed because it's so complex.
In microservice architecture.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why I believe we're gonna nail it down, and it's going to be amazing because of the observability.
Exactly.
So right now, because first of all, we dog food everything.
Yes.
We are like a client zero, and we test everything on ourselves before we're going to give it to customers, enterprise customers. The same for open source, to be honest. So we are running this microservice product for a long time now on Vercel. And when you go to analytics, for example, you have split by projects, but you can see it from the root. You can say project. The same for observability. And Vercel was also involved in a hotel for there's a standard that all across the stack, when the request goes, you want to trace this request and see, for example, all spans from the front end to the back end sometimes. Well, actually, you want. And We implement all of that on Vercel platform. Maybe not this perfectly, this backend one. But however, we do carry over the request IDs and other stuff, so you can implement that. We talked about the first one was rolling releases. Second one was micro frontends, both as a first class citizen of Vercel platform, and the third one is a blend of AI agent actually, and security. So because if you're enterprise, picture a situation like that. You're under attack, threat, whether it's a DDoS or denial of wallet or whatever. You've got this triggered alert, like Vercel anomaly alerts. If you're an enterprise customer, we can set it for you. It's not a standard thing. And then you go to your observability tab or firewall tab, and you see, okay, yeah, I've got this spike, but I don't know, for example, how to start, how to investigate it. Well, you can just select from left to right that spike, and there's a button, AI agent, investigate it. And then the AI agent investigate, check the logs, check the observability, check the fingerprints, analyze everything, and then identify what it is with some certain of degree of, and then on the end, it recommends you the actions like, okay, it looks like an ordinary, again, if you're e-commerce and maybe your competitors are so jealous that you're so successful because you're on Vercel and they don't know about it, so they just attacking you. An AI agent is recommending you like, oh, do you want me to add this custom rule to firewall? And just isolate your competitors, let them burn the request, and obviously.
Okay.
And that's the AI agent available to enterprise customers.
Nice.
Are the V0 models used for that under the hood?
That's a good question. I presume I would say no, but I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. I thought it's like this kind of question. But actually going to V0, I was also wondering, and we are wondering at Blazity, is there like a way for V0 to also help clients, I mean medium businesses or like even enterprise businesses, to help with migration with not only like the area of speeding up the design to code, because we already know that V0 is actually excellent in that area, but also like talking about recent public API beta of V0, we started to think that maybe V0 can also be used for other things like auditing the front end.
Oh, okay, interesting question. That's a small saying that to automate my work, because I didn't say about my team, but we do audits in our team as well. Yeah, that's a good question. V0 is used and is designed to be used by everyone. So let that be said straight away. For enterprises, I can focus on that and explain it more. We have a customer who used V0 with the UI, not even with the API. I mean the OpenAI compatible model in Cursor or Klein or what IDE you're using. They use only the V0 UI to migrate a massive 40 applications. So let's say hundreds of licenses of V0 for their internal development teams. And they managed to, in 4 or 5 months, to migrate from Angular shop, because they never been Next.js developers. They migrated the massive code bases into Next.js, and they did it under a few months. So we have confirmation, and I as a professional services, I was actually assigned to this project, and I worked. The procurement process was huge, so I joined very late to the project, and I was surprised that after a few months, 80% of work is already done by V0. Yes. Seriously, that what happened. So yeah, we have from the field confirmation that it's possible for those migrations. Then you want to pivot, so like eject from V0, the UI, v0.dev, to your IDE. You just don't want to bytecode everything, especially on the in the healthcare business, massive company. You eject it and want to use in your IDE as a replacement for your models that are using today. It's all about those best practices, the best web performance, and so the UI components and everything what V0 created, this proof of concept. This is what I said about POC, MVP, production, right? So V0 covered for them this part. However, they not vibe coded the rest of the part. And actually, they did vibe code it using GitHub Copilot, which they use other models as well, standard like Foro, Sonnet, etc. However, what I'm trying to say is that V0 is truly expert in Next.js. It will avoid putting those client components, on one page is TSX, you had 5 use effects. You don't want that. You want to avoid that. Or some architecting, the authentication, how you use it, skewing more to the client side. You want to avoid you want to follow best practice. So that, to answer your question, yes, we see it a lot. There is tremendous adoption in enterprises in V0. And I don't want to spoil anything because I'm not an official Vercel person, so I'm not going to tell more. But only one thing, there is a huge adoption in enterprise. Actually, we are surprised how big adoption is. Well, me personally, I'm surprised how big.
Yeah, actually, regarding V0, I was also testing the API myself, but I can say now that at the beginning I was quite skeptical to the the model that's excellent and does all the rendering strategies, decisions, the composition patterns, the best practice of Next.js.
Increase the context.
Yeah, I mean, I was really skeptical, but then I just used the V0. It actually one-shotted most of the things it was prompted to do, or
Thank you. Your words.
Just listed all the things that I wanted it to know from the audit or something like that.
I could talk a little bit more about V0, or probably I shouldn't, but it's public knowledge that we have our proprietary data set that was used for training, registry, SHA-CN influence the V0 outputs. That's public knowledge. And because of that, web performance is by default great. And because it's server components by default great, this security is like foundationals is covered. Yes. You're not leaking API keys in client apps, Yes. It happened. Well, not in V0, but it, that's a problem.
So when it comes to the AI tools, because we've touched on V0, what else is like something that you are proud of or something that you would like to recommend? You mentioned that the Vercel is sort of becoming native for the AI development or development backed by AI. And this is like super convenient or becoming super convenient for the developers as well to use Vercel as a native friendly environment for any AI applications. So what's under the hood there?
Yeah, so on Vercel Ship, it was announced AI Cloud.
Yes.
And, people might think, oh, Vercel pivot to AI Cloud, but it's a super natural way to do it. For us, because from the very beginning we were web-oriented.
Yes.
Right now, AI is web. The interface is web. By the way, Vercel contributed to this streaming UX we have right now with all the chatbots, conversational AIs. ChatGPT was created with Next.js. I personally also back in 2022, December, were hovering around the streaming with node fetching libraries from OpenAI. We were from the beginning of this AI, Gen UI movement, right? However, so why AI Cloud? Like I said before, we are our client zero, and we are dogfooding our platform. So we use Vercel to deploy Vercel. And I'm sure you know, because we talked about the V0, we have AI native product. It's called V0. And it's deployed and built using all open source Next.js, which is open source, AI SDK, which is open source, and that's the reason why we created AI SDK.
Yes.
Exactly because we start building V0. Oh, there's something missing. There's a gap. We created this. Okay, let's share it with the community. So we did it the same, like Next.js to Vercel, AI SDK to V0, and we had a very short feedback loop with our infra team, with our product team, with our frameworks. We are a little bit like Apple. So Apple, if you know Apple, how they succeeded is because from the production to sales, they were involved or owned the whole process, even the stores. Yes. Which is not normal, like for other companies. They had influence on every journey where the users been interacting with the product. So we do the same thing with AI Cloud. So you start with your idea, which is the moment of inspiration. You can create a prototype using V0. Then you deploy it with one button to Vercel. Then you observe it. Then you iterate with the rolling release, instant rollback, whatever. Then you have V0 API model to continue development. Then you have observability. Then you have AI gateway. You've got this marketplace where you have all the models. You don't need to sign up, give your credit card. You have everything under one API key from Vercel. The billing is through Vercel. And, it's the same price. This whole stack we actually use built for V0, and we are confident, and we're working with all the providers, all the other companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, xAI. We have all of that journey, and that's why, it's AI Cloud. It's AI native cloud. I challenge you. I personally believe there is no better platform to deploy your AI native app. Like streaming. You can self-host it. You can use sign up to everything. But if right now, because everyone got access to the tab key to vibe code. The time is the most important. Yes. So we, as this AI Cloud, giving you all of this, you save time. Time is money.
Yes.
Yeah. So I hope that answer why it's AI Cloud. I think it's perfect. I like it.
Of course. Time to market is, I do think, is nowadays one of the
iteration velocity.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the most important.
But something that we also observe from our, let's say, field is that there is this concept of vibe coding everything. Like there is this whole myth about you can have your app in 10 minutes up and running on the production. Of course.
You can.
It's possible, right? But what happens next? What happens next? Like how you maintain this app? What's the observability? Yeah. How, from the enterprise perspective, especially, like how you would know where something is wrong with your app, where exactly it happened. So all those things. And suddenly those 10 minutes are becoming maybe weeks.
I think you want to use platform that that the owners of the platform or engineers, first they contribute back to open source and then they dog food the platform and use the same tools.
Yeah.
Like that was the reason why Vercel was created, because we wanted the best DX. So the same philosophy, speed, security, DX apply to AI Cloud.
I think we can spend probably another 3 hours talking about different things, but I think we are ready to wrap up. Thank you very much, Tom, for joining us today. It was a real treat to hear about your experience, about your journey, about your team, about the things that are part of this very, very interesting and influential, impactful Vercel platform in general. So for me, a couple of takeaways that are from this conversation is that behind very sophisticated tooling, there is always an excellent engineering muscle that is sort of taking care of everything that we as a developers or companies, we don't see that. This is kind of transparent, but it's always there.
Well, to be honest, Vercel is try to be more transparent,
Absolutely.
but yeah. Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure. It was really good chat. Really enjoyed. Hope you're gonna invite me more.
Thank you very much for joining us today in Next Gen Web podcast. Thank you for being with us. Remember to follow us on social media, leave a review, follow Dom, follow Vercel community, and thank you again. See you soon.